Thank you, Arushi and Darryl, for joining us today. I'm excited and intrigued by your collaboration on a computational board game that you have designed together called Who Gets the Throne? Before we get into the details of the game, first let's do a quick introduction. Arushi Gupta is a junior at Lindbergh High School in San Jose, California. From an early age, she has been interested in using logic to solve math problems, which is the foundation of computational thinking. She's also passionate about children's education and has been teaching math to young kids from a very young age. Throughout her high school experience, Arushi dedicated time to learning computer science and graphic design. And in January 2021, she was looking for unpaid research opportunities to gain experience from a design thinking-based research project. When she found the opportunity to work on the STEM board game, she knew it was the perfect opportunity for her to combine her interest and influence change. She found Darryl through his work at Berkeley, while he is a member of the Embodied Design Research Laboratory, which is led by Professor Dor Abrahamson. And so Arushi sent Darryl an email asking about research opportunities. After an initial Zoom call with Darryl and her parents, she and Darryl got to work. Lieutenant Darryl Diptee is a retired military officer and doctoral student here at UC Berkeley's Graduate School of Education. As a learning scientist, his research investigates psychosomatic approaches to help historically excluded STEM students academically excel within oppressive social systems that are rife with negative gender and racial stereotypes. He earned his bachelor's degree in computer science at the University of North Florida and master's in aeronautical science at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. As mentioned before, Darryl is a retired naval officer, and during his time in uniform, he deployed to Iraq and other worldwide locations where he worked as a security manager, information assurance manager, and technology expert for the U.S. Navy. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Darryl.
Well, so let's start at the beginning. Darryl, before Arushi reached out to you, you were thinking about a board game. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. So I had this idea for the board game for probably a solid year in my mind. So when she emailed me, she didn't mention a board game or anything like that, but just based on her the audaciousness of this young woman writing cold emailing me, I was just really inspired by her bravado. So when I saw the email, I was like, okay, I have this project that I just don't have the time for right now because I'm doing all this PhD work. But most of us have these ideas kind of tucked away deep in our subconscious. So I reached out to her, set up a call, and we took it from there. But this board game initially was inspired by a meeting. Well, many things, but the initial inspiration came from a meeting I had while in the lab, the Embodied Design Research Laboratory, with some gentlemen from the Lego Corporation. The guys who build Legos, the thing you step on at 2 a.m. that hurts you. And they were talking about computational thinking and how they wanted to branch into computational thinking. And being a computer scientist that I am, I was thinking, hey, this shouldn't be too hard to do because I did volunteer work in prisons, teaching prisoners to code robotics and a bunch of other stuff. So computer science is right up my alley. And I love Legos too. Like, who doesn't? So that was kind of like the seed for this whole thing. And this game has come full circle now. We're not really in the Lego realm anymore, but we've kind of had to dumb it down a bit and get into, well, we'll discuss this later, but we are basically doing the same theme and the same ideas there, just in a different way.
Arushi, what was it about Darryl's research that intrigued you so much that you wanted to send him an email?
Yeah, so when I was cold emailing many different professors and PhD students because I really wanted an opportunity for research, I was looking for a lab and somebody who wanted to create a project that really was looking to help people in the world because that's just something I'm very interested in and passionate about. And of course, many professors and PhD students are very, very busy. So I did only get a couple of emails back. So it wasn't like a very much pick and choose process, but I was really lucky to find such a great project and something that I was so interested in, because a board game is something that all students are interested in, all children. So it was just something automatically really interesting to me. And then seeing how it was going to teach students CS and how it just had so much interesting abilities to it, I was like, I need to be a part of this. And that's why I chose this.
And Darryl, as you mentioned, you're busy with your doctoral studies. And even though now, or you were saying Arushi has kind of taken the lead, but you are still a big part of this project. Why take on this project when you already have so much going on?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So for anyone who's in a PhD program, you always hear this thing where they talk about striking work-life balance and so forth. So we spend so many hours reading publications from other people and writing, trying to publish your own work. It can be very, very stressful, and sitting 10, 12 hours a day at times.
Mm-hmm.
So for some people, they play cello, or they go for a run, or they do this, or they do that to kind of flex that other side of their brain, kind of get out of the chair. And for me, it's innovation, it's entrepreneurship, it's solving like deep social problems. That's kind of where I get my kicks, so to speak. So this board game, even though it's too busy to do it on my own, because it does take a lot of time and effort and brain cycles to try and create something that's worthy for the world, it was still important to me. So even though I didn't have the time to work on it, it was on the shelf, so it's kind of collecting dust. And once I found the right person who had the interest and the level of excitement that Arushi brings to the space, I knew that it would be easy to just let her take the lead on this, with me guiding, like a backseat driver, so to speak. Say, hey, maybe we should take a left turn up here, so to speak. But she had like 90% creative license on this. I would just kind of keep it on the rails, but most of the time, she had complete creative license. Because two things I wanted to do. I wanted to finish this project, but simultaneously, I wanted her to gain some leadership skills with leading a project from the front, as opposed to just taking orders from some old guy like me. So I think I accomplished both of those. Definitely, Arushi I've seen her grown and in confidence and so forth over the last year and change that we've worked together. And it's been just a really exciting journey.
Great. So let's dig into your game. Arushi, how did you two come up with the name? And can you also give us an overview of it?
Yeah. So the game is basically 2 to 4 players, and all the players are working to be the last one standing on the board. And we knew we wanted the title to be something like Last One Standing, but we realized that was already a game that existed, and it's quite a common name. So we wanted it to be something along the lines of The Last One Standing. And when we thought about the theme of our game, which we had been thinking since our first meeting, we wanted to do something sort of like dragons and kingdoms and palaces, that kind of vibe and atmosphere. So we thought that Who Gets a Throne would be a really good idea. Like, who gets the kingdom? Who's going to be the person that wins?
Mm-hmm.
And so the theme currently is 4 different people who are like working to get the land. And we have 4 different terrains, which the board is split into 4 quadrants. And each terrain, one of them is like rivers, oceans, forests, valley. And each quadrant is trying to get all of the other quadrants. So whoever gets the throne is how we came up with the idea. And the rest of the game is using CS concepts like for loops, while loops, do while loops to do different actions on the board. For example, there's if then cards. So if something happens, then something else happens. And each card has a different function on the board. And when you play everything together, then the board gets filled up and different things happen. And then you can also hit other opponents, remove people from the board. And it's like offense and defense based.
Right. And so you use dice? Do you use pieces, to move around?
Yeah. So everyone gets their own piece. And there's also dice. And the board is not like a traditional board that you would see, you kind of are allowed to move anywhere you want around the board because you're trying to get into different terrains. And when you get to different places, some of them are chance spaces, so you can get a chance card and some imaginary thing happens to you,
Mhm.
or you can get a well card. A well gives you more resources, and resources are also the cards. And each turn you start with taking a card, and then using the cards in your hands, you're allowed to do some actions, and then the game ends with, sorry, you start with rolling the dice, then you do an action with the cards that you have, and you end your turn by picking a card.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah, so it's like if valley, then attack. So if your person that you're attacking is in the valley quadrant of the board, then they will be attacked.
Mhm. And so it sounds fun. Sounds like some strategy is involved. And kids are also learning computational thinking, right? So without maybe even knowing it, right?
Yeah.
So Arushi, how did you get interested in computational thinking?
At first, I was not the biggest CS fan because I felt like it was kind of being forced onto me, and learning syntax was not fun for me, especially when like the teachers would give me just a problem to solve and then I'd just be sitting there coding for like 2 hours in class. I was like, this is not fun. But I think what intrigued me more about CS was the logic part. I was always interested in the logic part and figuring out the pseudocode, explaining my thought process to people, like this is how I would solve the code without actually doing the syntax part is the part I enjoy more. I think just I got into computational thinking and logic just by doing questions and being introduced to it. It wasn't something that I was actively looking for, but something that was kind of just present in my life, and I really enjoyed it.
Can you talk a little bit about what is computational thinking? Like, are there examples from everyday life where we might be using it but not really realizing it?
I think there's a lot of things that fall under computational thinking. It's pretty much any time that you have a problem and you come up with a solution in a unique way. At least that's what computational thinking has been to me. Growing up, I was very, very interested in math, especially this one competition that was called Math Olympiad. And we were forced to take it at school actually, so I didn't really have a choice. I don't think I would have taken it if I had an option because who wants to do extra math? But I actually really enjoyed the competition. All of the questions were really, really fun to solve. And it used a lot of like logic and different kinds of thinking. It wasn't just like 2 plus 3 or basic math. You had to use your brain a lot. And that's what I really, really liked about Math Olympiad. And after that, I stuck to teaching students Math Olympiad because I wanted everybody to get this experience to be able to learn how to think logically. But I think that's like a very concrete example of thinking logically when in everyday life, we do have to use that kind of computational part of our brain every day.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think computational thinking can be learned through a board game?
I think it's a very interesting way to teach students computational thinking. As you said before, they don't really know that they are learning computational thinking while they're playing the board game. And I think that was kind of our point. We wanted them to be playing a game, but also learning computational thinking because no kid is going to be like, oh, I really want to learn computational thinking today. So that was kind of our purpose. And I think a board game is really useful in that because you can disguise computational thinking aspects through different functions of the board game, which is what we do with the cards and how we kind of have the code shown on the board game. For example, like the different cards that are still in use or still on the board, we have them out, which shows that your code is still running. And then when we put them away, that means that your code has stopped running. So there's just different aspects of it that make it very clear that it is using computational thinking.
And so why a board game, right? Analog just seems so old fashioned these days. I mean, kids are about apps and computer games, right?
Yeah, I think another thing that Darryl and I really wanted was to have a board game that would have a game that's everybody could play because we also want to emphasize this game to underrepresented areas who might not have the technology needed to be able to play apps or or website games or just online games in general. We wanted something that was accessible to everybody all over the world. That's why we chose like a physical board game.
Yeah, that's definitely the end goal, is to kind of get this in the hands of historically excluded communities. Because as a computer scientist myself, I honestly believe that there is no such thing as a female brain or a male brain. And every time I read an article in my news feed that says female brains do X, Y, Z, and male, I'm like, oh my gosh, let's get it over with, So I want to try and smash that stereotype, especially when it comes to computer science, because I honestly believe each of us have the same capabilities, and it's just a matter of exposure and getting used to going against the stereotype and kind of proving that anyone can do this. And for historic reasons in this country and around the world, certain people and certain genders and so forth, they just are not part of the conversation. So that's a big thing for me, personally. That's what was driving. I mean, that's what's driving my entire research at Berkeley, right? Mm-hmm. Just trying to get into these areas and trying to inspire what I describe as a hidden genius, right? I can typically see it within this child before they can see it within themselves, right? And unfortunately, a lot of society is designed to keep that oppressed or ignored. And until somebody sees it in them and helps point it out, it's typically very hard for them to see them themselves. So I'm hoping this game could kind of help make that happen.
Yeah, another thing we've been doing to try to eliminate these stereotypes is that all the characters in our game are different races and different genders, so that everybody kind of feels included. And I think, like, me personally being like an Indian girl, I wanted to see something like that. So we do have a character that is an Indian girl, and it's kind of like I'm on the board game. It's pretty cool to see.
Would either of you like to share any of aha moments for you during the process? Some people talk about them as highlights and lowlights.
I think one of the aha moments for me was when we decided to have spaces on the board that said chance cards or +1s, which is more resources. I think that before that, the game was kind of boring because there was no purpose for people to be moving on the board. So we just realized everyone was kind of moving in circles, staying in their own little area, and nothing was going on. But after we started having incentives on the board, people were moving around and we were able to see action on the board, which helped it a lot. So I think that was one of the biggest aha moments for me.
And for me, I think the big one, which happened earlier than what Arushi just mentioned, was remember when the idea, even before Arushi emailed me, was Legos, right? And trying to create this computational board game with Legos. So it was actually going to be like a 3D board game. So you like build up and all kinds of interesting stuff, which might still be a thing, who knows? But nonetheless, when we shifted away from Legos into like cards and almost like a chessboard almost, right? Like the squares on a checkerboard kind of thing. For me, the aha moment was the cards and how we needed to, how we designed it in a way so players would, like, you draw a card from the deck and you have to strategically know which deck you're drawing from. So we have multiple decks. We have, like, let's say like action, like I'll simplify it, offensive cards, defensive cards, we have like 4 or 5 different decks. So you have to know which deck you're pulling from. And because they're randomized, the offensive cards in the offensive deck is randomized. You have to kind of piece together. You have to put your code together, right? So you might get like a if then, but then the if then doesn't work unless you have another card to go with it, so to speak, right? So you have to kind of like put them together, and there's a little bit of luck involved, but then there's also a little bit of strategy. So for me, a big aha moment was shifting from this Lego kind of thing to, oh my gosh, now we're actually we're kind of teaching them to write code, kind of, sort of, but we're not using the word code, and we're not using the word computer science. So I actually gave Arushi the analogy, which of course she didn't get, of Karate Kid with the wax on, wax off kind of thing, right? And she was like, "What are you talking about, wax on, wax?" I was like, "Oh my gosh, you're killing me, Arushi," right? So yeah, I had to tell her the whole story about wax on, wax off, and I think there's a little bit of that going on here, where imagine if you play this game and you're quote unquote winning, or even just competing, it's a very, very competitive game. You're using if-then statements, you're using for loops, you're using all kinds of stuff, but without really knowing that you're doing it, right? So if you transition, if you're playing this game at 5, 6, or 7, and you shift into computer science, the idea is at some level, subconsciously or consciously, that you would have already been exposed to those things, so that you'll kind of have the grip, to mentally digest some of the actual computer science ideas and concepts, as opposed to starting from scratch.
That's awesome. So what are the next steps for Who Gets the Throne?
So currently we're working on creating the actual design of the game so that we can get it printed out. So we're working with different artists, and we've been working on designing the box, the board, the cards, each individual component of the game. And after that, we're going to professionally print out the prototype of the board game, which is probably going to need some fixing again, because that's how prototypes work. And then after that, we want to give it out to a larger audience. We definitely want to donate it to underrepresented areas, have it in underrepresented schools, and definitely have it on shelves at stores like Target and Walmart.
It has been an incredible pleasure talking with you, Arushi and Darryl. We wish you the best of luck and hope to see Who Gets the Throne in classrooms and on store shelves very soon.
Thank you so much.